While Jesse James is often credited with having the first ever robbery of a moving train, which is actually inaccurate for several reasons, we'll look at the real, first ever recorded train robbery in the world. Before we begin, however, please subscribe and like the video. It really helps, and consider Patreon, yada yada yada. In 1855, trains had been fairly common in England, yes, England, up to this point, but after a short boom in the industry, wages were reduced as traffic slowed. For the South Eastern Railway, things were no different. They ran a short train to the Folkestone port from London, and regularly hauled payments of gold bullion to be shipped to French merchants. This is where we'll meet the train robbers: Edward Agar, William Tester, James Burgess, and William Pierce. Pierce was described as a rough and tough man who was also a former employee of the SER and was fired for gambling on the job. Burgess was a family man and worked security on the SER trains for 13 years before the robbery, but due to wage cuts, he couldn't afford the life he had been making for his family. Tester was an extremely educated and talented gentleman, and was assistant superintendent in the London Traffic Department, but he wanted more than what his job provided. And finally, Agar, who, above all else, was probably the most important person in the operation. He had developed skills in safe-cracking and burglary for over 22 years, and lived off his talents. Due to their knowledge of the company, they made copies of the keys needed for the safes, and planned each part of the job. Tester made Burgess security for all evening trains for the month of May, and on May 15, 1855, Burgess signaled to Agar and Pierce, who waited every day outside the London station, that a shipment was going to happen that night. The two bought first-class tickets and boarded the train, with Agar sneaking into the guard's car, where the safes were located, and hid under Burgess's coat until the train began to move. Within 30 minutes, Agar had already opened the first of 3 safes, got past the iron bands and locks to the transport boxes inside, emptied all the gold, and then reattached the bands and locks and closed the safe back up. That's gotta be some kind of record, considering that they only had keys for the safes themselves, and not the transport boxes. Agar knew that the safes were weighed at different stations along the way as a security measure, so the gold he took was replaced with his exact weight in lead. At the Red Hill station, a bag of gold was handed to the waiting Tester, who returned to London to continue his shift. Pierce also at this time made his way back to help Agar. Once the train left Red Hill, they quickly got the other 2 safes open, and took as much gold as they could get away with. They finished cleaning up as the train headed into Folkestone, where Agar and Pierce barely had time to hide under coats and bags before the doors opened and the safes were removed for shipment to France. Agar and Pierce got off the train at nearby Dover with the bags, had a late dinner, and got back to London around 5 AM, 7.5 hours after they had left the city. They made off with about 224 pounds of gold, which in today's money is nearly 3.5 million pounds sterling, or 5 million US. Stay tuned for how they were eventually caught, and for more fast history coming up in the future. I'm Eric the LonePineWolfman, and remember, never stop learning.